Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is well. Yeah, work's just kicked back in this week, so it's not too busy at the moment, but just things are sort of starting to kind of like change from the summer kind of routine, and I'm a little tired, but we will soldier on, and yeah. Kira says, "Whoa, check out that telescope." Yes, this is my early birthday present to myself. I've just picked it up, just got it today. This is an SV503, and it's a 102 mm focal length. It's really quite nice. It's a refractor telescope as opposed to my old reflecting telescope, which is a Newtonian. And it's like, I'm really looking forward to playing with this. I've just been kind of playing about with it, and it's like I haven't been able to use it properly yet, obviously. Sad thing is, though, I didn't realise it's as fucking heavy as it is. It's about 5 kilos. Now I've been using this thing, which is a little Ioptron cube, as a go-to. This can take 5 kilos. This is over 5 kilos, just a bit. When it's got the camera on, it's at 5.8 kilos when it's got the camera on. So that thing can't take it, which means now I've got to save up for a go-to mount. However, there is the EQ503 Skywatcher thing, which I'm looking forward. I will save up for. I can get the tracking mount version of it for about just under £400, and then you can get that upgrade kit to make it a go-to mount, so I'll probably go that way. But tomorrow night, it's clear out tonight actually. It wasn't supposed to be, but hopefully it's a clear night tomorrow night, and I'll be able to take this out and have a little bit of a play and see if I can get the camera to do shit with it. But yeah, it's a cool new toy. I'm really looking forward to playing with it. It's got because I've never had a refracting telescope before. This is the first one. It's built a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. When you look at it on the websites, it doesn't look like it's much. It looks like it'll just be a couple of kilos or whatever. But no, it's an aluminium body on it. Nicely, it's got a dual speed focuser, which my reflector doesn't have, which will make getting stuff in focus a fuck ton easier, because it is a ball ache on the old EQ130. It's like, god damn. But so I've had to resort temporarily to using my bog standard manual EQ mount for it, which is an equatorial mount. Basically, it's designed to sort of arc with the sky, movement of the sky, as you turn the knobs. But yeah, so I've had to resort to that, and that's going to be the situation probably until the new year. Although I've got a fuck ton of overtime due, so I might be able to save up for it before. But I'm really looking forward to using this to take some photos of the Orion Nebula when it gets around November and stuff, and that's when it'll be up. But yeah. Yeah. Speaking of work and stuff of the sort, I'm back at uni now, taking on administrative law. Check out the big brain. As far from cinema as you can possibly get, yes, but it probably pays better. Didn't know you were if you were planning to stream next weekend, but if so, I won't be there, as Lexi and I are going with a romantic weekend away. Nice one, Kerry. You have a lovely time. And don't be sort of sneaking a peek at the stream on your mobile phone or anything like that, will you? Because sounds like a really good bit of kit. We will find out. I'm interested to see how it performs, but these Apo scope type setups are particularly useful for using with the camera. So I take the lens off, get a T-mount, and then I'll be able to sort of just plug it into the back of the scope, which should be fun. And as I'm going to be in midway through October, about 4 weeks' time, I will be up at my brother's, and I'll be gifting him this old lens, which is just it's a 170 to 500 Sigma super telephoto. So my brother will be getting that to add to the camera that I got him earlier on in the year. So he's actually been doing really good at that stuff. I try not to be too much of a bore in this shit. I'm just really excited about this crap at the moment. But yeah, he showed me last time I was up a couple of the photos that he'd taken. Actually, no, when I was on, I was chatting to him on Skype, and he kind of showed me a couple of the photos that he took, and he seems to be doing some pretty cool stuff with that. So I'm glad he's making use of it, and I hope he actually finds it as good as a hobby. He's got a bit of an advantage in some respect, because now I've got a Canon R, which is a fucking nice camera. Canon have just suddenly turned into complete and utter twats, and they've gone, yeah, we're stopping anybody making third-party lenses, which I suspect won't last, because the photographic community has gone, well, if that's the case, then we're going to swap to Sony or something. So don't do it, Canon. Don't do it. One of the good things about Canon was there was a lot of third-party lenses. So, yeah, absolutely should be... they should be kind of supporting that stuff and finding a way of getting a little cut from it. Dear. Minty says, nice. My dad was well into astronomy, had his own scope and tracker in a shed. Yes, I would love that, but I don't have my own back garden. I can use the back garden, but it's not mine to kind of build that. I'd love to have a proper kind of hard mount for all that stuff. Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to this. So this is going to be fun. And interesting, because like I say, I've never used a refractor before. Dear. But yeah, it, like I say, mid-October, there'll be a missed stream or two, because I'll be heading up to Gary's and probably taking my camera. I don't think I'm going to be lugging this. May do. Don't know. Got to think about it. But we are both hitting our 50th birthday, so I better make the effort to be there for it. Yeah, dear. Better to be into astronomy than astrology. Yes, it is. Oh, dear. Oh, you're not going to Russia, are you, Carrie? They're just conscripting everybody at the moment. It's ridiculous. Nikon are good for third-party equipment, but sometimes having official is better. Oh, yeah, sometimes it is. Absolutely. I don't mind the lenses that I got. They're really good. It's like this one on here. This is just the bog standard lenses, the cheap end ones. I mean, even that was 800 quid. But they are really quite nice and all that sort of stuff. But there's things that are offered by third-party lenses. Sometimes you just want to be able to try a different type of lens for not too much. For me to upgrade that lens suddenly will mean that I have to spend the best part of £2,000 if I want to go kind of upper series. And it's if there was third-party lenses, I'd be able to get one for under £1,000. Likely, but there you go. Ah, dear. Happy half done. Yes, it's not for a little while yet. Got about another 4 weeks yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing my brother and my family again. That's going to be really nice. I think so. So tonight we are going to be watching Mark of the Devil at Richard's behest, I think. So we shall be checking that out. A link is in the description, so sort of get yourselves all kind of fired up and ready for that. Get yourselves all lined up, and we will start in a little while once we've probably had a little bit of a chat. Flaherty 46 says, thoughts on the Hellraiser trailer? It looks really good, actually. I think it's possible it could even be better than the original. from what I've seen of it. The original is great, and it will always be a classic. Don't get me wrong, but the original did have, certain production problems which kind of hampered certain things, but it's still an incredibly solid film nonetheless. And I think it very easily to describe it as an outright classic. And I don't think anything's going to change that, even if they do a quote unquote better version with this new one. I'm fascinated to see it. I know there was a lot of buzz about it's a gender swap, the usual kind of grumblings and stuff like that. But with the original, it's the Cenobites were always very ambiguous. Certainly, Pinhead in particular was described as having sort of a whispery, feminine kind of voice. So it's going to be interesting to see how that presents, but it looks promising. The only problem for me is it's on Hulu, and I'm hoping it'll get a physical release at some point. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. I hope it does. Never cared for Hellraiser, never one for S&M. That's only really an aspect of it, is what I would say, Gav. That's not what it's about. It's just kind of part of how the horror presents itself within the film. The story is most certainly not about sadomasochism in a kind of meaningful sense. It's just it's just kind of one of those things that they you kind of focus on it just because it's sort of out there, it's a very visual thing. It's what the Cenobites kind of use, if you like, a kind of sadomasochism. So, yeah, if that makes any sense. Andy Robinson was always great. Yeah, he was a great actor. And does that really cool switch when he comes back as Frank, if you know what I mean. The dice script that turned me it was the dice script that turned me off in the wooden acting. In the original, there was a little bit of that. It wasn't entirely there. But you got to remember, it was an incredibly low budget film that was kind of made by, obviously, directed by Clive Barker, who wasn't a director up until that point. So, and he did a fantastic job because he listened to people around him. I've seen far, far, far worse acting in films that I still respect. So that never really kind of bothered me that much. Gave up on the Hellraiser series a long time ago. Certainly the sequels got progressively worse. I mean, the second is not as good as the first. The third is... I think the third was a real turning point to what it ended up becoming. It became sort of all about the Cenobites. And the story in the original is not really about the Cenobites. They are antagonists within, but it's not about them. They are just these rather remarkable creatures, which is kind of, a lot of people sort of look at it and go, that it's that usual thing of an audience when they look at a film with these remarkable and these very eye-popping kind of aspects, and then they suddenly go, well, that's what the film's about. It's like, well, no, this is just kind of part of how the story's told. It's an aspect of the story. It's not the story itself. But it's never going to chime with everyone, and it is, the original is a very slow movie, but I like slow movies. I'm perfectly willing. I've always said I'm not scared of a film being boring once in a while, as long as it's got a reason to be doing so. Initial reconstruction scene in Hellraiser is epic. Yes, it is. It is, and rightfully a classic of special effects. Mad Foxes on Tubi was disappointed. 10 minutes. Really? 10 minutes cut? That's ridiculous. It's just not worth watching. I mean, I've got the British cut on VHS over there, and that's hacked to shit. But I got it because the cover on it's amazing. He didn't like what the Powers did to Rawhead Rex, but Cabal and Candyman are very faithful adaptations. Yeah. I mean, Candyman does take quite a few changes. I haven't read the book, but as I understand it, it's not exactly sort of set in the ghetto and stuff like that. It's a very different location and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of things were changed about it, which kind of changed the meaning of the film to a certain extent. But um, to some extent, it really does kind of follow the spirit of the original story, as I understand it. Mad Foxes for a Blu-ray, Severin or Vinegar Syndrome. Get onto it. Yes. Mad Foxes is just it's a definite guilty pleasure. It is one of those films I just love, kind of like yelling at the screen to, because I've always said it is a terrible, terrible film, and it is. It's fucking terrible. There is not a character within that film, with the exception of one of the victims, or one or two of the victims, who you can really sort of go, "Oh." So the hero of it is an arsehole. The Nazis are obviously arseholes. Everybody's just a complete and utter shitbag in these things, in that movie. But there's something quite joyous about watching a film like that, and absolutely no guilt in seeing them get what's coming. Pinhead was supposed to make a cameo in Freddy vs. Jason. I hate these mashup movies. Everybody sort of like kind of wants to see Big Monster A against Big Monster B, and I always find them incredibly disappointing, because they really sort of sacrifice story for a promise of a spectacle, and I think that's a real pity. If there was a natural way to sort of put them together, that'd be one thing, but Freddy vs. Jason was watchable-ish for me. By the time it got to the climax, it just got so astonishingly ridiculous that I just kind of went, Glenn, wash your mouth with soap and water. Mad Foxes is a terrible movie, but it's fun. There's no shame in that. If a movie can be fun to watch, then sometimes that's just enough. Hero of Mad Foxes was a SWAT member from Hell of the Living Dead. What did you expect? It's a good point. It's a good point. Most versus movies also have me for team up or have both survived such idiocy. Yeah, they're compromised by a lot of things, not least franchise viability for either or. It's like, yeah, I find them a bit tiresome. I don't think I've seen one that I actually really enjoyed. It's essentially, it is the smashing together of action figures, if you like. If you like that sort of thing, who am I to say that it's you shouldn't watch it? And I wouldn't say you shouldn't watch it. If you enjoy that stuff, then more power to you. I just have very different expectations of a movie, I guess. Oh dear. Cropsy versus Leatherhead. Okay. Excuse me, my eyes are really bleary today. I didn't sleep very well the last couple of nights, so I'm a bit it's probably why I'm a little bit hyper. Probably that and the 14 cans of Monster I've just drunk. Not really. Don't do that. You'll have an episode. AVP bored me to tears. I love both, but together it's like keep it away. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those. It's like those two franchises have no business being together, really. Especially with what Alien is and what Predator is. Predator is a very, very different film to Alien. In any of the series, the most action it got, really, was probably Aliens, but even that retained a certain amount of kind of like tension and stuff like that. There's a lot of build up in that movie. I pretend Resurrection doesn't exist because I really don't like that movie. Alien 3 I really like, actually, and boo me if you will. But you know, Predator was very much an action movie. It was a very slow-paced action movie. Yeah. You know, it does build on rely on a certain build-up and tension and all that kind of stuff. But again, Predator 2, it's just been mentioned. That is another film that sort of transformed largely into an action movie from being a thriller, for instance. And then subsequent kind of Predator films have largely kind of based themselves in sort of action. I haven't seen the new one because, what is it, just on Mubi? I would like to see the new Predator film, but I won't see it unless it comes onto physical media, because I'm not subscribing to like half a dozen different bloody video services, only for them to potentially just take that shit away when I just happen to want to watch it. I imagine it will come on to Blu-ray at some point. I hope so. If Amazon can do it, then why can't they? Prey was surprisingly enjoyable. That's what I've heard. I've got tempered but reasonable expectations of that movie. It can't be any worse than The Predator, because that film was shockingly bad and one of the very few films that I nearly walked out of. Why subscribe to all these services only to rent things? Yes. Yeah. I still buy physical. Yeah. Yeah, I don't get me wrong. I will use digital for certain things. You know, I'll buy digital versions of films on things like Amazon Prime on occasions. Mostly if it's a film that I'm not sure I really want taking space up on my shelf. But if it's a film that I want to keep and I know I really, really like, I will get it on physical sooner or later. It's why I'm one of the few people in my family without a Netflix subscription. Yeah. Netflix has really gone downhill, but they were always a little bit choppy. I was with Netflix for a couple of years, and I didn't really end up using it that much, and B, everything sort of disappears, you know, just when you want to watch the goddamn thing. What I learned from Predator: autism is a superpower. Yeah, I think I made a comment at the time that it was. Actually, this was at work, so it was a fucking dangerous comment. I says the kid in it is kind of like, you know, autistic, and they make a big deal of it, but it's still that kind of like super autism. But you know, one moment he's like a, and then the next minute he's kind of doing advanced trigonometry and astromathematics, some kind. I says it's just this real cliche, and the person I was talking to just looked at me shocked. She says, "You can't say that." I says, "It's not me saying it. That's what the movie is saying." You know, it's like not that the autism has its kind of like downsides. Of course, it does. It is a disorder to some extent, but it's a disorder that, you know, I think just about everybody kind of has some sort of aspect of in their life. So it's sort of an enhancement of certain, I don't want to say infirmities, but some part of it is, but, you know, it can confer some advantages in other areas. Like, you know, when they talk about the savants, that's just the extreme end of that kind of stuff. And I know a couple of people that I really strongly suspect are like that. Lovely people, get on with them really well, but they can be very hard to get to know, for instance. So yeah, I would never kind of try to denigrate anyone for that. The Predators find the autistic boy and discover that trains are great. Oh dear. Alien 3 is alright as a standalone. I don't mind it as part of as the tie-up to the entire film series, as far as I'm concerned. But there you go. It's Asperger's. I think it is. Yes. It's very similar, isn't it, in many respects? But yeah, I could be showing my ignorance there. But anyway, what we got? We will start the film at past, I think. So again, make sure you're all ready to go. I'm going to take a sup of beer because I haven't started. I keep opening this and then waiting half an hour to actually take a sip. There goes any monetization I haven't applied for. Beer, the breakfast of champions. Predators was a good idea for a movie, but they couldn't buy Aidan Brody as it. I thought he did all right as the in the role. It was a little bit flat of a performance if I was going to give any kind of criticism of it, but I mean, I hadn't really seen him in anything else before then. Some people were kind of tied up with what he had done before, which was generally, I think, it was like kind of like romantic drama comedy sort of stuff, not kind of a film like that. Do you like Pink Flamingos? I do like Pink Flamingos. I have the Criterion version up there, which is an excellent release. It's cleaned up just enough, upscaled just to the point where it makes it watchable on a big kind of modern screen, which is all it should have, but it still retains that kind of low budget grimy feel. They haven't kind of polished it to within an inch of its life, and that's important. It's a balance to be made with this upscaling and stuff. You don't want to destroy the texture of the movie by making it look so clean and crisp and all that kind of stuff. And excuse me, Star Trek Next Generation had this issue when they did the Blu-ray releases, I think it was, and then all of a sudden with the higher definition you could see every seam and every crease on their uniforms and all this kind of stuff. The sets all looked very fake because they were just TV studio sets. So yeah, it's a balancing act, and getting that right it's terribly important, especially with kind of genre films from 60s, 70s and 80s. There's something about the quality of the picture which is kind of important. It should be retained when you kind of do the upscaling, not destroyed. I like Pink Flamingos too. John Waters' early stuff is great. It's mad as fuck, and that's what I love about it. It's very, very cool. I have this probably annoying tendency just to talk about my interests and myself, narcissism. Not necessarily. Sometimes, conversation's a hard thing. I'm not always the most talkative person. Despite what I do here, there's something about doing this, which means I can rattle on for like 3 or 4 hours straight without even watching a fucking movie. But when it comes to kind of like, sitting in a pub with a bunch of people, I might not be talking that much some days. Used to be very quiet, very kind of introverted. This kind of brought me out of that somewhat. I'm a lot more confident than when I was like a teenager. That is one nice thing about getting older. You tend to gain a lot more confidence. John Lexi and I watched Female Trouble a few weeks ago, and she was like, what the fuck? Yes, you would be. She absolutely would be. Why wouldn't she? Dear, oh dear. Also, Lawrence Fishburne, Alone on That Planet, must have had a KFC there. Yeah, and his role in Predators was such a weird one. It was pitched very weirdly. It kind of went strange places that it just didn't quite chime with me. I think overall, Predators is probably, or possibly, the second best of the lot, and I know that's a little sacrilegious. A lot of people love the second one. I like the second one. I can watch the second one. I kind of have some reservations about it though, that I didn't have with Predators. And I think Predators sort of got back to that kind of hunt mentality as much as anything. But yeah, I don't know. It seemed a little bit off with Predator 2. But yeah, somebody was saying earlier on about kind of like how expensive importing DVDs and Blu-rays has gotten, and yeah, it will be. The pound has gone quite weak, and that's basically because the government has apparently turned around and given all the rich folks a tax cut, but not so much everybody else. I don't know why they're taking the playbook from the US, but especially at this moment. But there you go. I guess they're trying to get a bunch of very rich people to move here for tax reasons. It can work in some respects, but like so you or me are not going to see the fruits of that necessarily. It's a complicated world. It really is. Okay, folks, so we will get started in just a few moments. If you start giving us thumbs up, we will get started with the movie, and then it is an hour and 37 minutes long. And I expect a lot of Witchburn. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. Pound got weak. I thought its value was increasing compared to the euro. Well, I'm talking about in relation to the dollar, apart from anything else. But the euro will be taking a hell of a whack at the moment as well because of current events. Let the witch burnings begin. As soon as everybody else is ready to go, we will go. The pound is £1.7 against the dollar. Yes, and the last time I looked, it was more like about £1.62 to the dollar, and even higher. I remember quite clearly when it was about almost £2 to the dollar. But yes, we're suffering, and mostly it's because of what's going on in the world today with Russia, gas shortages, and all that kind of stuff. It all has a knock on. It's almost like the system is rigged against us. Yes, yeah, the guillotines have been sharpened. That might be in Russia at the moment. Putin's getting a little bit of a frosty reception from his fellow countrymen, apparently. They're not liking the idea of being shipped off to the neighbouring country to, shall we say, try to play catch with the Ukrainian artillery. Inflation off a scale now, we expect changes there. Yeah. I can't help you with that at the moment. I'm not an economist, but yeah. Okay, folks, let's get started. So if you're all queued up and ready, we will be starting. The link is down below. We'll be starting right at the beginning. There's nothing to have to skip on this one. So we'll start on 5 and go on go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Helps if it starts right at the beginning, doesn't it? YouTube does that really weird shit sometimes. It's very of its time music, isn't it? I'll go watch Soleil since I've never seen this. Go watch Solo, sorry. Say, enjoy yourselves. Yep, cool. Was that Herbert Fox? I don't know what it is about this. It reminds me an awful lot of the New Adventures of Snow White. This opening. Lovely music in this film, really melodic, plays against the brutality of the scene. 1 minute in from Coach Load and Nunskin Raider. Yeah. I mean, obviously, this film really, it's 1970 this film came out in, and The Witchfinder General was 68, I think it was. So there was a slew of these films which came along trying to do the same thing. And this is one of the more successful rip-offs, if you like. Double bill this film with Witchfinder General. Not tonight, I'm afraid. We have watched Witchfinder General before. So you should be able to find it in the stream somewhere. In the list. Blood on Satan's Claw is possibly my favourite of these types of films. Yeah, so there was like, there's probably about 4 or 5 which kind of stand out. Along the way. I get the demons and all that kind of stuff. And of course I've been watching not really the same sort of era, but Ken Russell's The Devils, which I've been reviewing. It is halfway written, well, over halfway written. It's about 3/4 of the way written now. half of the full length of the video is already edited, so it's close. It's getting there. Won't be a 3-month wait for this one. Witchfinder General is a magnificent movie. It's not surprising that it generated so much interest in kind of remaking and stuff. Yeah, the gimmicks of cinema back in the day were quite funny. I think they did sick bags for pink flamingos and all sorts of stuff. But what was it? The Tingler, I think it was probably the cake taker with its electrified seating. It's a quality to these films, though, of this time, isn't it? The kind of saturation you get it in even like George Romero's 1970s films. But it's that weird thing where the red is almost like oversaturated all the time. See, one of the things when looking at the Devils and things like that is, you know, this kind of shit actually did happen. The sort of brutality of these kind of punitive displays, I guess we can call them. And it's quite horrifying in its own right. You don't have to exaggerate some of the stuff they used to do. And tarring and feathering, for instance, is not as innocuous as it initially sounds. It's not just a humiliation thing. I can't remember what the effects of it were, but it was yeah. Red blood looks like melted orange crayons in those Romero films. Yeah, it can do. It can do. Fortunately, with Dawn of the Dead, it was it kind of fitted in with the almost comic book aesthetic, though, didn't it? Tom Savini always complained about that, but it wasn't just that film. I think it was to do with the kind of films that were using the color timing that they had to use to get the blood to look kind of natural on them would kind of change a lot of other things. So it always pops really, really strongly. You have a soft spot for the Demonsville Terror. I've never heard of that one. You can always get a job as a shorthand typist. See, the burning scene in Witchfinder General, where Oliver Reed gets toasted, apparently he wasn't worried about the fire, but he was worried about the makeup that he had to wear. Because some pretty brutal makeup goes on in it, and he was not comfortable. They really did get the kind of burning scenes down, didn't they? You know, just the way they're framed and the kind of angles they have to take. It's because, you know, let's be frank, it's quite a dangerous stunt to do. It doesn't take much for it to go a little bit wrong. If it goes a little bit wrong, it tends to get out of hand. The crew wanted Reed to sweat out the alcohol. I don't know how bad he was for that at that time. I know he probably was still kind of a raging alcoholic. However, his performance in that film doesn't ring at all of insobriety. Lexi says they missed her. Hello, Lexi, if you're watching. See, one of the things about all the kind of witch burnings and all those kind of stuff, inquisitions, is the political aspects of it, and the Devils is very much in that vein. But many of the other witch movies have aspects of that. You know, certainly when it comes to the real life events, a lot of that stuff was more political than it was religious. Although the people who, you know, perpetrated it did it in the name of religion. God, Udokia looks really young in this, doesn't he? Uh, Richie Nelder's character is called the albino, and yet he isn't an albino. Yeah, that was one of the things, Kerry, that I kind of noted with those movies called Blondie, and it's like, yeah, he's not that blonde. One wonders if that's just the Italian script did that, and they just cast differently, and because Italian directors often have a tendency to not want to change one word of the script, even if it makes sense to change it. So it's quite extraordinary, the way they do that. There's some real interesting character actors in this, though. And I'm trying to remember names. I can't remember any of the bloody names of these guys. We've seen these many of them in so many movies. Simon's always the guy, the go-to guy for the names of these actors, that kind of thing. And it's good to see you on in the chat there, Simon. Probably a mistranslation, as you say. You know what? I think with the Italians, a lot of it was partly because they didn't want to have to go back and change the script in multiple languages for the voiceover actors and all that kind of stuff. I kind of suspect it's um, an effort thing as much as anything, probably more than it was, shall we say, artistic integrity. But it's kind of weird. Obvious ADR is obvious. Can only imagine the field day Lucio Fulci and Umberto Lenzi would have with which movie. Well, you know, there's always Don't Torture a Duckling, which is kind of a witch movie. I'm sure either Lindsay or Fulci must have done something along these lines somewhere. Lindsay would probably zoom in on the flames, yes. Most of the Euro exploitation directors would do a lot of that. But there's a reason why Umberto was called Zoom Lindsay. Nicknamed anyway. A lot of this was filmed around Salzburg in Austria. Really? Okay. He's not quite Vincent Price, is he? He's good, but he's not quite Vincent Price. Did Lindsay do a TV witch film? I have no idea, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. That's the thing, you know, these Witchfinder General kind of derivatives were pretty common in many forms. And Michael Reeves' film, The Witchfinder General, was in its own right incredibly controversial. And some of the stuff they showed in that, you see some of the cut scenes and all that kind of stuff, many of which still exist in outtakes and stuff like that. He really did push the boundaries. And of course that, you know, certainly with Britain, when that came out, it would have been Trevelyan, I think, in the BBFC at the time. It's films like that which is kind of what prompted him to eventually retire a couple of years later. And Stephen Murphy came in, you know, just at the wrong time when it came to kind of controversial movies, and only lasted a couple of years or so. Lindsay did some supernatural films. Ghost House for one. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the Italian directors did kind of shift with whatever the time was. And that's the thing. It's true, particularly of the Italian film market, not just the Euro exploitation in general, but particularly the Italian market. They would see what was popular or what kind of like got a lot of interest, and then they would make their own versions of it. We took that well. House of Witchcraft was released by Vipco. Yeah. The tragedy that was Vipco when DVD era arrived is they didn't make too much effort, did they? When it came to the DVDs, and that's not even just a comparative thing. I mean, even of the time, Vipco were just taking pretty much VHS rips and shoving them straight on a DVD. It's a real shame because they were a company that had so many properties and stuff that they could have drawn on and really made an effort, but for whatever reason, whether they just didn't have the imagination or didn't have the money, they just never really kind of got their shit together when it came to that. Thank you, Richard. I will just reiterate, at the moment I'm on 16 minutes and 43 seconds. I might be a couple of seconds behind you guys just simply because I fucked up at the beginning. Because YouTube went, oh, you started at so-and-so. Science, ladies and gentlemen, this is science. I do like the Monty Python Holy Grail kind of witch trial thing. It's a fair cop. Vipco DVDs were ported over from the same video masters used to author their VHS releases. Yeah. Yeah, they made zero effort with those DVDs. And it's such a shame because, I mean, they had such a name to build on. You know, Vipco were kind of like right there in the middle of the video nasty scare. So they had that kind of reputation. And if they'd made a bit of effort with it, it would have been so much better. But no. Sadly, they just either couldn't be bothered or just didn't know how. Keep stabbing her until she bleeds. Yeah, I know. These kind of arbitrary tests for witchhood back in the day were beyond ridiculous. And again, The Devil's has its similar kind of scene. It's a bit nifty with that whip, isn't he? Vipco release of The Slayer is the only DVD I've seen that's had tracking lights on, yes. Soleil is one of those films that very, very nearly works. It doesn't quite. There's a lot that's very commendable about that film. It is slow and it could be described as boring, but it almost works. The ending of it is kind of disappointing. Whip it good. Now that I've saved you from the nasty man, how about a little ooh la la? Oh boy. Do excuse me yawning. It's been I woke up at about 4 o'clock this fucking morning again. I tried to have a little bit of a kip earlier, but no dice. Grindhouse Experience sets were notorious for VHS to DVD transfers, tracking lines, and Malaysian subtitles. You know, for all the woes that physical media is going through, some of the best versions of films are only available on those hard copies, with all the extras and all that kind of stuff. And of all the work I've done on YouTube and stuff like that, I'm so proud of the fact that I managed to get myself on a few Blu-ray releases in one capacity or another. I just wish those could go a little bit, bit more out there. But the guys at the release house basically were wonderful about that stuff, especially when I did the Mountain of the Cannibal God. When I did the extra for that, they had to do a lot of work to get the clearances for various bits and pieces. Because of my ignorance, and they worked overtime to make sure that they could actually put that thing on there, which is magnificent of them. Mirko was just wonderful. He's a lovely guy. Should have to get in touch with him again at some point. Grindhouse, Vipco's Slayer release. You can hardly see it. Yes, it's murky. It's murky to say the least. Arrow Blu-ray of Slayer is a decent transfer with some good extras. That's a nice tip. Thank you. It's a film I've got to watch again at some point because I haven't watched it in a long time, and it's definitely an interesting little film. Like I say, it doesn't quite work, but it's so close. There's some come to bed eyes from her. I need more beer. Right back. So, Oakham Brewery Citra Session IPA. It's very nice. Oakham's just down the road from my hometown. So it's a slice of a little taste of nearly home. If I'm on the train, it's like the stop before I get home. Oh, sloppy, guys, sloppy. Never picked up the Arrow one. Not that big a fan of the film. No, it's fair enough. I mean, it's not going to be for everyone, but one thing that's become, over the years, increasingly apparent is I have a very unusual taste in movies. Like I say, I mean, it's a whole kind of thing that personally, I don't mind if a film's boring, but if it has a point, there's a lot of people who would not agree with that kind of sentiment. Feel that a movie has to be thoroughly entertaining. But for me, the approach that I have means that I can watch a film like Soleil and get something from it, where a lot of people struggle with it. But it's not really something you can sort of deliberately necessarily choose. Sometimes it's just how you're educated into watching films, if you know what I mean. Sounds a little condescending, but it's not supposed to be. I was lucky enough, and I've said it before, I was taught film studies under a guy called Benjamin Halligan, and he's a very interesting writer on film. And his lessons sort of opened up a different way of looking at films for me. So I remember being at university and picking up a book called How to Read a Film and thinking that was such a pretentious title. Why would you read a film? Kind of thing. But then I eventually sort of learned what that means. And Ben was no small part of that. Okay, Kerry, enjoy. Sounds like an old story, that does, Simon. It's very familiar for many films, I think. Yeah, if we don't see you at the end, Kerry, then have a lovely, lovely holiday. La 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 la. Very holly jolly. That is some beautiful countryside. He's a very robust ugly guy. Skip and frolic, yes. That's it. We're kind of in some respects blessed in the uh, the Europe area of kind of like having so many wonderful places that you can shoot. It's not to say that anywhere else doesn't, but the range of kind of vistas that you can film, and the old buildings, the old cities, and more modern places if you're doing that kind of film, it's just mind-boggling. And America has many types of landscapes, but when it comes to kind of architecture and stuff, it's very limited in comparison to the European continent. Michael Armstrong got the director's job as he'd worked on Witchfinder General. Yeah, it makes sense. Nice music, says Mike. Yeah, it's kind of, it's like I say, it's very of its time, but it suits the film, sort of. It's a little discordant with the era of the film, I guess, but it almost has that Cannibal Holocaust kind of vibe to it, where the music sort of is so so many degrees off from what the film is actually doing and where it's set and all that kind of stuff. Because there's that cliche, you know, with musical composers for films and stuff like that, that they kind of go so heavily into kind of researching the time and the instruments and all that kind of stuff, get so kind of caught up in that sort of thing that that you have to have that authenticity. But then you get films that sort of just go their own way with it. And this seems to be one of them. You just imagine Julie Andrews to come along and start singing, yes. See, these days I'd just be like kind of going around with my camera and stuff like that, you know, when I'm in places like this. One of the things I'd like to do next summer is perhaps look at going up to the Lake District, because it's such beautiful countryside. I'd love to do some landscape photography. Yeah, you're probably right there, John. See, one of the movies I always think about when you think of these sort of musical accompaniment not being what you'd expect would be stuff like Killer Nun, which has an incredible soundtrack to it, but it doesn't. It's not what you would expect of a film like that. Yeah, Vinish has just said to him, I'm an officer of the law, in the dodgy French accent. I mean, speaking of kind of like soundtracks and stuff like that, I mentioned it on the last one. The other week, I had a movie night at my theatre. So it's just me and a couple of mates get together, hook up a console, in my case a PS3, play a few games and watch a movie. And our selection for that showing was Suspiria, the original. And the soundtrack to that is just like so out there. It's like so incredibly weird. Because usually I talk to the lads about, kind of what the movie is that they're going to be watching, usually why I've chosen it and that kind of stuff. So essentially they get a little kind of Lampy Man live, but in real person. To an extent, but I won't talk through the entire movie or anything like that. But next time we do it, we're going to be doing probably the remake of Suspiria. You couldn't have just sharpied it in. I looked long and hard. Long looks to fucks looks long. Herbert Long doesn't really have that kind of air of authority in whatever he does, even when it's like kind of like the old Pink Panther movies and stuff like that. There's something about him that's always quite authoritative, even when that's challenged. I can't imagine Lom as my landlord. I actually have a really, really good landlord. So tomorrow morning I'm going off to the it's going to sound weird, going off to the tip with him to kind of like help him out with some bits and pieces, part of which is mine. Yeah, he's always looked after me, looked after the place. I'm very, very lucky. I've had very, very bad landlords in the past, and I appreciate it when I get a good one. Very casual. Yeah, we're going to stretch you to an inch of being snapped, and then we're going to tear your tongue out. Next. What? No lipstick? Witch? Witch? He spilt his Ribena. It's as cold in here as it my heart. I don't know why it is, Simon, but when you said that, I kind of had Nosy Bonk sort of flash into my mind. It's a glass of Vimto, yeah. I used to be addicted to that stuff. Acting. What an eccentric performance. You remember Derek Griffiths used to advertise Vimto? God, there's a blast from the past. Well, that's a solid defence, isn't it? No man of God would perform a crime. Citation needed on that one, I reckon. That shirt needs more frills, yes. As graphic as the tortures are in these films, um, the reality was often a hell of a lot worse. In The Devils, the scene where Grandier has his legs kind of crushed in the basically with the wedge in the blocks of wood, which incidentally the BBFC thought was supposed to be his testicles getting crushed. No, it was his legs. In the Aldous Huxley account of it, it's kind of recalled that well, not recalled, but it's kind of recounted that his legs were crushed so badly that they basically popped. It just split. His legs were mush by the end of it. Nail bars had a long way to go back then, yes. These are genuine torture devices they're actually filming in a museum for these scenes. Really? Okay. I had no doubt that there were real torture devices, but yeah. These sort of medieval kind of torture devices were just astonishingly brutal. There was a scene in a film. I can't remember which bloody film it was. I want to say it's Salo, but it's not. Oh no, it's one of the Nazi exploitation films. But basically, there's two sheets of wood which are kind of led together like that, and it's just set just a little bit higher than the kind of crotch height of the person. So they're sort of resting on this just with a little bit of weight, and it's apparently an incredibly painful thing. it's not pleasant in the slightest. But it looks so innocuous in the film. But isn't that true of so many torture methods? Be it sleep deprivation, people don't realise quite what that does to you, until you sort of start going into detail about it. Yeah. Oh, you know which one I mean, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think which one it was. But yeah, they actually sort of did that, and it's apparently incredibly painful. One of the things not everybody realises is stuff like crucifixion, for instance. Obviously, again, another form of torture. It's not just the pain of being kind of like nailed to a piece of wood. The the gist of that sort of thing is basically they give you a little platform which is just big enough for you to support your weight on, and if you don't hold yourself up, you basically you go like that, and all the weight comes through the chest, and it basically starts to suffocate you. But your body automatically kind of reacts to that. So you can't help but try to hold yourself up, but the longer you hold yourself up, the more painful it gets eventually. Yeah, even something as innocuous looking as the stocks, for instance. The bit where you get your hands and your head put through holes and stuff like that. They're always set at a height that makes it very difficult for you to kind of like support your body weight. So, although it looks like it's just a humiliation thing, it's actually physically causing you damage, and it keep you in there long enough to actually cause permanent damage. You have a book on torture somewhere, do you? It's a fascinating subject, actually. It's morbid, but it's fascinating. Yeah, yeah. It's a weird kind of mercy, isn't it, John? It is one of those things people don't realise quite, how the human body has a strong desire to keep itself alive. This is beyond the kind of sort of mental process, to the point that when it feels something's failing, it will kind of kick in and try to preserve the process of life. And a lot of these old tortures would kind of exploit that. Like I said, with crucifixion, you would almost automatically try to support yourself. But so it would prolong the torture, even if you were kind of like, just let yourself go. You couldn't just do it. Ooh, saucy. But you see, even like kind of modern day torture and stuff like that, they have these things called stress positions. Stuff like forcing someone to kind of just take part of their body weight, leaning it into the wall and stuff like that, and keep you there for hours. It's incredibly painful. It gets that way very quick. Waterboarding is another one. I always love the example of Christopher Hitchens, who was always like kind of waterboarding is not torture, waterboarding is not torture. It's simulated. It just makes you feel like you're drowning. So he volunteered. He put his money where his mouth was, and he volunteered to undergo the process. And he lasted about like 3 or 4 seconds before he had to stop. After which he went, "No, it absolutely is. It's a different type of torture. It's not as invasive in some respects, but it is just as bad as any." I think as those things go, one of the more insidious. If waterboarding isn't torture, why do it? Well, yeah, no, they think they called it enhanced interrogation, didn't they? And they went, you're never under any real danger. It just makes you kind of like, it just puts you through an ordeal. It's like, apart from the psychological damage it does, it actually did do physical damage. There was no end of people, physically injured from the process. But yeah, torture's torture. She's a bit of a Grandier character. What time are we in the film? I am currently at 49 minutes and 58 seconds. It's funny though, isn't it? All this kind of stuff. I remember a time when kind of like people would sort of talk about this sort of stuff in various media, and it'd be like kind of in an almost comical kind of way. Not as the utter brutality it is. And as hard a time as movies got, like this got for kind of depicting a much more realistic depiction of what this stuff is. They got a hard time for it because they're like, oh, well, it's so it's sadistic and that kind of stuff. You go, yeah, that's the reality of it. And partly that kind of attitude from sort of censorious bodies and things like that is very much an attitude towards the art form of making movies, that movies should be entertainment and not reflect the brutalities of reality. You foolishly tried to open a third window on your laptop and it had some some sort of fit. I have terrible, this is my confession for the evening, I have terrible discipline when it comes to tabs. So I'll open up like 50 odd fucking tabs sometimes. Hope he's had his tetanus vaccination there. Yeah, again, another real torture device, that. You can tell where the scenes have been kind of recut in, can't you? To some extent. Is that kind of change of quality thing going on? Is that Jack Black? I'm going to go with probably not. Not going to these guys, Richard. Yeah, Minty. And then the sun was in. I felt sorry for her. Then the sun was in my eyes, and I fell over and accidentally inserted my cock into her 50 times. Yeah, for 1970, it's pretty brutal for 1970. But then you did have like the Herschel Gordon Lewis stuff, the Blood Feast, and so on. Those films which were probably more graphic, but a whole lot less traumatic than a film like this. This is one thing about this film; it does have that tendency to kind of feel like it hovers on those moments of torture, which it does, and for reason. I mean, one thing I would say about this film is it prurient? Possibly, because I mean, it does sort of spend a lot of time kind of focusing on the torture and all that kind of stuff, and the story is relatively thin in the film, but it doesn't feel like it's particularly frivolizing the the horror. It seems to take it pretty damn seriously. And this is kind of the point of the movie. Um, that sort of accusatory finger of you're not doing it because it's God's will. You're doing it because you're just using that as an excuse. Impotent. Strangled by Lom. That is not how you strangle a person. Don't ask me how I know. He crossed the line. Yes, he did. Oh, whoopsie, did you go too far, sir? This is Herbert Lom's oh fuck moment. That look on his face is like, I wonder if I could eat him fast enough for nobody to actually kind of notice. Get rid of the evidence. He's just doing his job. It's not his fault. He loves it. Yeah. Yes, guards, take the body away. He had that unfortunate accident involving a kitten and a muffin. I had nothing to do with it. Don't mind the marks on his neck and that kind of stuff. He did that when he fell. So saith God. And at this moment he's going, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. Wait till the tabloids get hold of this. It's just a bronze plate fell on his head. Yes, again and again and again and again. Does a stylus make that kind of? I don't know. It's very squeaky, isn't it? The Foley guys were kind of really hamming it up. They've had her on the rack. They've torn out her tongue, and now they're just going to burn her as well, just for good measure. Yeah. And just out of frame, you've got like Edward Woodward. They had the ADR out his rambunctious, enthusiastic Christian singing. It rather is, isn't it, Richard? But again, it's like with Father Grandier, the real Father Grandier, as well as the one in the Devils. the sort of torture that they put that guy through was quite incredible. Forfeit your worldly goods to the church to save your soul. That was kind of a real thing. One of the things that happened with Grandier, of the Devils of Loudun fame, was that they basically the whole thing was because he challenged Richelieu, Cardinal Richelieu. One of the things that they got him on, shall we say, one of the pieces of evidence was this document that they attributed to him that was essentially a pact with the devil. And I've kind of argued, not just me, but from what you sort of see of the evidence of all of that kind of stuff, is that the chances were that he never actually confessed that. They say he did, but because they got like a signed confession. But you know, when you're doing that kind of shit to someone, either they'll sign it, or somebody will just go, we've got a copy of his signature over here. All we'll do is we'll copy it, we'll forge it. Considering the amount of crap that Grandier actually kind of went through, and he was tortured horribly, and he never was even with the Catholic Church's records noted as having confessed to the stuff that he was accused of by the nuns. And even the accusations from the nuns were dubious. Puppetry was, in some instances, actually claimed to be an act of witchcraft. Essentially, it's animating the unanimatable, inanimate, I should say. He's a simple fellow, isn't he? What would these guys be like if they ever saw CGI? You've brought into life the imp that loves the ring. Fun fact: until the Renaissance, belief in witchcraft was until the Renaissance, belief in which witchcraft was sort of heresy. Indeed, oh right, okay, no, sorry, it's my bad reading. Must grab another beer. More beer. More beer. I believe that drinking on stream is a heresy, isn't it? According to YouTube. Yeesh. See, water torture. An excellent example of a mundane sounding torture. How could it possibly be that bad? Mythbusters did it. They were advised not to do it, and Carrie Byron had a breakdown. She lost her shit doing that. But yeah, one of the most insidious forms of torture I can think of was, I think it was in China or Japan. I think it was China. They would string a person out, so they're like kind of like strung out like that over a piece of bamboo. It was just a young sprout of bamboo, and it would, because it grows really quick. But it'd keep them alive for days and days and days until this thing was just growing, and it grows, like I say, significantly in days. Nasty. I also have questions about Udo Kier's character arc in this. It's so passive throughout most of this movie, and it barely shows a flicker of kind of like resistance to it. There is a little bits of it there, but not much. In modern prisons, they break with isolation. See, that's the problem. I think for me, I'd be like, more isolation, please. He's kind of reaching, isn't he? Smoke a flame like a witch. We charge you with first-degree puppetry. could stand this nonsense only so far, but when it comes to puppetry, that's the line. Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same, Simon. Puppets. Never thought I'd be brought down by puppets. They're really doing a full kind of showcase of the spectrum of torture devices, aren't they? See, that's just being a dick. Ouchie. Yeah, you're probably right, Simon. That's a very theatrical hug, wasn't it? Why must I go back? Well, it's a torturing to be done. And he's got to stand around and go, I don't like. See, that's the face of a consummate professional, isn't it? When they do the torture. You watch, that'll be the moving thumbnail thing on the video now. It's just me making that face and whipping. Child acting, ladies and gentlemen. Still, not as bad as Manos. Well, the child acting wasn't as bad as the, shall we say, the child ADR. Good lord. She took the bread. That's a definite sign of witchcraft. There was a mark of the devil too, really. No, it's apparently terrible. Eee. It is one of the blights of Euro exploitation to a degree. That the directors would often have to just shoot what they were given. And that's, that explains a lot of kind of like the Jess Franco, what I'll call C grade stuff. Because, a lot of those films he didn't have time to rewrite or kind of even care about. It was like, it was making one main film and then two or three on this side. It's interesting camera work. A lot of the cast from part one were in part two in similar roles. Did they have their fingers restored? That's the question. I'm not attacking you. I'm just trying to check for marks of the devil. Oh, bunny. He's having a hard job taking off that medieval dress. Yes, he is. How long after was part two made? I don't know. I assume that's if I was about to eat the rabbit. Yeah, yeah. Simon might be able to answer that. Yeah, get scrubbing up those blood stains. Rabbit puppet. Oh, come on, you barely put up a fight. Mark of the Devil 2 is filmed 1973. Might have filmed them both together. Well, this is 1970, so it's 3 years apart. But they may have used some B-roll, I guess. Blasphemy! Take him away. We'll trump up the charges later. It's one of the amazing things, isn't it? It's like physical media has preserved all sorts of films. The best, the worst, and everything in between. And that extends even to TV. The illegal activity of recording stuff off air has preserved a fuck ton of stuff. I seriously kind of worry about the future of, preservation of films, TV, all that kind of stuff. That now that physical media is going away. Especially with all the kind of like, you take down that website because they've got pirated stuff on. It's like, quite often that's a fairly unique repository of certain types of material. Or certain materials, I should say, not certain types. Sounds a bit more like kind of like, there's also really exotic stuff on there. Doesn't take much to get the villagers fired up. Yeah, they must have been aware of some of this shit, obviously. But she's standing up and doing her thing. Attack, attack. They have nothing to take but our sticks. Do you remember that way back when the BBC used to preserve its old material by setting it on fire? Goes way back before then. During the World War, First World War even, a lot of film stock was basically gathered up and destroyed for the silver nitrate in it. They kind of thought of it as being pretty worthless. And if there's one thing that's true, it's a lot of the people who own the copyrights and all that kind of stuff don't really care about preservation. If most of the major studios these days had a say, every time they wanted to do a remake, the old version would go away completely. Execution is very enthusiastic about his work, it has to be said. Run away! Run away! This bit reminds me of the Dawn of the Dead sort of music towards the end when Peter's in the attic and he's just about to shoot himself and he doesn't. Pitchforks at dawn. So most of them got little sticks, haven't they? Yeah, look at what happened to the original Star Wars before that mucking around CGI. Hard to find older copies, yeah. Yeah, for all the Star Wars fanboys, for want of a better word, who constantly big up George Lucas. Yeah, you just have to look at his actions with his own movies to understand that he's no better than most of them. Richard, I saw one just recently, like a couple of days ago. It might be the same one, but yeah, it had the original cut. Had a film source by the looks of it, an actual kind of like celluloid source, and it was from those days when it was not episode 4 on the opening crawl. When it came to that stuff, I was less bothered about the upscaling and cleaning up of the image and that kind of stuff than it was the addition and of various materials. You heard the story Lucas mainly changed Star Wars to stop paying royalties to his ex-wife. It's a possibility. Fact of the matter is, Marshall Lucas was one of the few people who managed to save the original cut of Star Wars, because the original cut of Star Wars was pretty forgettable for the most part. The final battle scene, for instance, was not a ticking time clock. There was very little stakes in what was going on. Marshall Lucas and the other editors inserted all the control room footage and made it look like the Death Star was approaching the moon, the rebel moon, which added a lot of tension. And I think they took out at least one trench run of Luke having a go. It's one of the things I always kind of have a bit of a bristle about, is the idea that Disney alone ruined Star Wars. It's like, no, George was making a damn good effort at it over 20 years ago. In fact, he was making a damn good effort at it from about 1981-ish. Even back then, he was tinkering with the who shot first thing, and it sounds like a trivial thing to some, but it's very illustrative of his approach, and it's arrogance, in my opinion. But I do have the original cuts of Star Wars and Empire. They're on the last DVD release that they allowed that stuff on. But it's such a piss poor transfer that I guess Lucas kind of went, okay, shut the audience up and just give it to them. So it's a fully boxed in version. So like on the screen, it's sort of like the image is about kind of like yay sort of big. It's letterboxed on all sides. But it is pretty much the original cut, including the lack of the episode 4 thing. George Lucas has some pretty freaky ideas. There was a whole thing with Indiana Jones and the Marion character. There was supposed to be a lot of suggestion that when Jones and her were together, she was like about 15 or 16, if that, and he was like closer to 30. He thought it was a good idea. I think it took Steven Spielberg to talk him out of it. I'm not dead yet. I think that's still hinted in the movie. Possibly a little bit. Yeah, it is, I think, a little bit, but it's not as explicit as kind of like how they originally were going to pitch it. It was like, Lucas is a very strange guy. I struggle with the idea that the guy is a genius. So when it comes to the technical kind of visionary sort of stuff, certainly. The use of CG and all that kind of stuff was very forward thinking, although probably ill advised, in my opinion. But yeah, ILM and DTS, all that kind of stuff, all those technical advancements he made was quite something. But I've long said, as a writer, as a director, and even as an editor, he really does think he's a great editor, and he's not. He's not that brilliant. And that's the movie. Udo Kier gets kind of spiky squidgy to death. Lucas did Howard the Duck, says it all. Yeah, that's some of the... I mean, I don't think it was particularly just of the time kind of thing. Some of the humour in that, it was a little bit weird. The whole bestiality kind of thing was like... What was he thinking? Anyway, so his best movie aesthetic wise is THX 1188, I think, isn't it? I think it was very derivative. I think he was trying to make his 2001. I don't like the film, but it is a stylish film nonetheless. You would defend Howard the Duck. Fair enough. As long as you enjoyed it. But anyway, we'll wrap it up there. That was a great suggestion, Richard. Thank you very much. It was good to see that film again. We got to talk about it a little bit, at the very least. But that's how these things are. Oh, Kieran, you're back just as the point that I'm having to close because I need to go pee. But anyway, I have to see about next week. Hopefully we'll do another one next week. I think it's possibly will be a Saturday night if we do this again next week. But as always, suggestions on the Rambleaholics on Facebook, and we will kind of see what we want to go see and all that kind of stuff. I think that was a good choice. I enjoyed it. It is one of the better Witchfinder type movies. Excuse me. I promise I'm not that drunk. It's one of the better Witchfinder movies. Decent cast, shot really well, a little cheesy, and definitely a bit sleazy. But I shall bid you all a lovely weekend. I shall hopefully be enjoying my new telescope tomorrow, if I can. And I will see you next week, or if not, the week after. Until then, take care, folks. Thanks for joining. Have a lovely rest of your evening. And we will miss Kerry next week, but we will soldier on. Good night, folks.